A legal reckoning for Donald Trump's tariffs. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments today on whether the president's use of a 1977 federal law for his sweeping levies exceeded his authority. And for that, Jagruti Dave is covering that story for CNA from Washington, D.C. Jagruti, remind us first of the path to the Supreme Court for this case.
Well, it all started back in April when US President Donald Trump declared a national emergency, blaming foreign economic practices essentially for what he saw as what he described as the large and persistent trade deficits experienced by the United States. So what he did was declare that national emergency and invoked this emergency power of 1977, which he said gave him the power to impose tariffs. And he imposed these 10% tariffs, made the announcement in the Rose Garden on April the 5th. He described it as Liberation Day. And he said that this was going to rebalance the US's trade practices with other countries. Of course, some countries experienced higher tariffs. China went up to 145% tariffs at one point. But all of this is to say that several businesses were spooked by this whole scenario. They were concerned about whether this was even legal. And so they sued the Trump administration for these tariffs, one of the arguments being that this emergency power of 1977 has very specific conditions in which it can be invoked. And there is no real mention of tariffs as being part and parcel of the act itself, as of the ability to invoke this act. And so the lower courts actually ruled in favor of these small businesses and states. But Donald Trump then went to the Supreme Court to appeal this. And that is what is being heard in oral arguments later today.
Now, how long might the Supreme Court take to reach a ruling, and what sort of scenarios could potentially play out?
Yeah, look, we're hearing oral arguments at the start today, and it's unclear how long this could take. But what we are hearing is that Donald Trump is calling this a life or death situation. And it really is a big deal for him, because if, for example, the Supreme Court does follow the lower courts and rule against him, then not only does this undermine Donald Trump's negotiations with other countries that are ongoing, but it also could upend several deals that have already been made with countries like the United States. Donald Trump claims that the United States would have to pay back billions of dollars in revenue from tariffs that they've already collected. So there are serious implications. Now, remember, the Supreme Court has been filled by Donald Trump nominees. It is a conservative-leaning court, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to rule in favor of him. Previous executive authority cases that have been dealt that the Supreme Court has dealt with have gone in Donald Trump's favor, but they have been for a temporary period. So it's really unclear what the lay of the land looks like. But if it does go in Donald Trump's favor, some economists say that this could result in higher prices in the United States as businesses decide that they will pass on those costs of tariffs on to consumers, as it appears they are here to stay. So there also could be wider economic issues as well, where it impacts the jobs market.
Many thanks, Jagruti Dave for CNA in Washington, D.C.